So welcome everyone. Also from my side, as Max said, this is the last regular session of this lecture series, apart from the symposium and the workshop. And it is my true pleasure to have Maya Kahanoff with us for this session. Maya is a senior lecturer at Hadassah Academic College in Jerusalem and the Hebrew University of Jerusalem Swiss Center for Conflict Research. She holds a PhD in sociology and anthropology, and she completed her postdoc studies as a Fulbright Fellow with George Mason University.
With Chris Mitchell
Welcome.
and Tamra and
Ah,
Avruk
perfect.
and
Nice group. It sounds like an exciting group.
yeah.
Maya, when I was a PhD with Iran, what we would ask every guest lecturer after this formal academic presentation, we would ask one question. So if you would have not enrolled in an academic peace and conflict studies career, what would you have done instead?
Wow. Well, I consider myself more as a dialogue person, and not necessarily peace and conflict and all these big words, but more intergroup dialogue. And I've been doing it both academically and as evaluator of projects of various NGOs, and when I'm teaching, and I guess wherever I go. this is my mission in life. I don't know what to say.
Good. No, this is
Okay.
this is perfect. This is the perfect answer. You're truly devoted and dedicated to what you chose to do. So we are looking forward to your talk about narratives and identity. Afterwards, I'll try to do a very brief discussant input, and then the floor is open for Q&A. As I said, you have to leave at 7:30 sharp, but this might give us a bit of time to look back at the full lecture series and maybe give a brief outlook at the symposium.
Okay.
Maya, up to you.
Okay. So as you see, the title, the transformative process of dialogue. Okay, this is my my thing. Yeah. Okay. Oops. I don't know why it goes like this. Okay. So a brief, very brief. You see it? Yes. You see this? Yeah. So that's very brief about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, just for people to kind of be in. So, we have conflicts on the territory, resources, security, big now. People, that's what they talk about. Right of self-determination and identity, okay? And, okay, I'm doing this because I call it, this is historical background, but it's actually narratives of, okay? Because each group here depict it a little bit different or emphasize a little different things. So the history from the Israeli perspective, the Jewish perspective, is the Zionist movement started the 19th century as a response to the persecution of Jewish minorities in Europe, culminating in the Holocaust, and Israel as a response, national home for the Jewish people. And Israel is considered to be the historic homeland. Okay, that's kind of very broad categories, but it's really the core belief here. Yeah. Now the historical background or narratives of the history from the Palestinian perspective. Of course, the Palestinians are the indigenous people of the land of Palestine. Yeah, Zionism is colonialist movement, and we hear it a lot since October 7th, since the war, actually, in Gaza, right? The Zionists actually the colonialists, and that the Palestinians are the indigenous. And Jews are considered to be foreign invaders, right? That's the narrative that we hear mostly in Europe and the States now. But remember, please, that for Israelis, the picture is of Herzl, yeah, the person who had envisioned the Jews coming back to Israel, to their homeland. Yeah. So for Israelis, for Jews, it's the national home for Jewish people, and it's the historical homeland. So you can see right in the outset the very big gap of our narratives of this place and our beliefs and our perceptions. And yeah, that's very, very big. These are slides that I had from an earlier presentation, so it stops. You can continue it to these very days, to October 7th even. But you can see that same events are interpreted or seen very differently. So from the Israeli perspective, yeah, it's the above one. 1948 is considered to be the War of Independence. Yeah, where Israel got its independence, and it's celebrated every year, yeah, with parades and so forth. The same year or event is considered for the Palestinians as the Nakba, which means the catastrophe or the tragedy, because they lost their, their country, their homes, and many of them were deported, expelled, fled. Yeah, no, from the Palestinian point of view, they were expelled, of course. So the 48 is a constitutive event for both sides. But you see, while it's celebrated for one side as a war of independence, a great joy and victory, it's regarded as a catastrophe for the other side, losing their land and home. And mainly it's forbidden in Israel, it's forbidden for them to celebrate it, to commemorate it, yeah? And talking about narratives, it's forbidden in the Israeli schools and the education ministry, by the education ministry, it's forbidden to teach about the Nakba. There were better years where it was allowed, but then with recent governments, it's been forbidden. And in a minute, we'll talk about the role of narratives and the importance of it. And you can think for yourself why it's forbidden to teach the Nakba in Jewish schools. So War of 67, again, for Israelis, it's a liberation of the land. And for Palestinians, further occupation of the land. It's called the Naksa. It's like a repeating Nakba and so forth. And 87 and more from the Israeli side, it's called terror, the Palestinian terrorism, and of course what happened in October 7th and on, it's a terror. And for Palestinians, it's considered struggle for liberation, okay? These are big things. And as I write in the article, you gave Oliver or Maximilian, you gave the article. So as I write in the introduction about the role of narratives, okay? Kelman wrote about it, Bartal wrote about it, many wrote about it. And the narratives in situations of conflict tend to be exclusive and selective, okay? And they explain the conflict through partial, narrow interpretations, mainly to justify the group rationale and portray one's own group as peace-seeking victims, okay? And sometimes we're compelled to resort to violent measures in their own defense. And probably nowadays you can hear also Israelis talk about the war in Gaza that is seen around the world as aggressive, very aggressive. And in Israel, it's seen as, you know, we're compelled, we've been compelled, we have no choice, you know, they made us, and it's a response. It's not our character, it's not who we are. We're peace lovers, and we're actually victims. And of course, Palestinians, I'm talking about generalizations now, okay? There is nuances and variety in the Israeli society. Not all of us think alike. I will not talk about it right now. And of course, among Palestinians, although it's more difficult to hear the nuances, but each group will say that resorting to violence, it's legitimate, you know, and they had no other options. So all the literature, of course, about conflict transformation and reconciliation talk about the need for parties in conflict to shift away from the monolithic views of the conflict, okay? And the need to incorporate, and Kelman wrote about it a lot, the need to incorporate the other side's perspectives, okay, into their understanding of the conflict. That's a big mission, okay? That's what we're trying to do in courses of introduction to conflict and conflict resolution. It's a big thing. It's very, very difficult, because actually narratives are very functional, actually, and they constitute, or they serve as anchors and bulwark of identity and legitimacy and security. Okay, so people need to feel justified and to feel legitimate, and if you are trying to change, if you're trying to change their narrative or to introduce a contradictory perspective, it's actually construed as a threat to cognitive consistency, cognitive and emotional, okay? And we say that members of the groups growing accustomed to seeing themselves and understand their identity in a flattened, in one-dimensional, positively biased sense, okay? And when you're trying to change the narratives, it actually you cause people to meet their image as reflected in the eyes of the other, of the opponent, okay? And this image, if Israelis are exposed or told about, you know, their image, we see it's reflected in the eyes of the opponents, or right these days also in Europe and States, it's generally negative, and it's inconsistent with the party's self-images. So in dialogues that we're trying to conduct, or face-to-face or people-to-people interventions, right, in an effort to promote processes of mutual recognition, right? That's the whole field of people-to-people. We want to help people to promote understanding and acquaintance. But we have to realize that in this very dialogue, actually it causes people to meet not only the other as they didn't know them, but also they meet the image of themselves as projected by the other. I hope this is understood. This is a very difficult thing, and it's very unsettling for Israelis to hear about their aggressiveness, or to hear that they are considered to be a colonialist, or that they're or the genocide, right? Blame is very unsettling to the very self-image, to the belief of righteousness and moral, image of morality and peace loving. So the encounter with the other, and I'll talk in a minute about the dialogues, but the dialogues that have been considered as a panacea, you say panacea, or that like a miracle. That's what you do. You have to meet your opponent, get to know each other, and so forth. But the encounter with the other, I argue, it creates a threat to participants' internal order and stability of their worlds, okay? And the way we're experiencing. So there's a big potential there, but at the same time, it's very unsettling. Okay, so let's move on. Yeah, so I don't know if you had sessions about intractable conflicts. If students are aware, they know these terms, the intractable conflicts, yeah?
Not per se. Kind of, we touched it, but we did not have a session on this group of conflicts. So you can maybe in 1 or 2 sentences summarize.
Okay, so intractable conflicts, very briefly, they have long durations, they last at least a generation, they involve, so the Palestinian and Israeli conflict, of course, is classified by scholars as intractable conflict. It finds expression in the numbers of casualties, loss of lands, damage to property, refugees, and daily overshadowed by fear. Of course, these days is a huge example of it. And for both people, I can tell you that for both people, it's like a deja vu. It kind of evokes an old collective traumas, okay, for the Israelis, especially for those who were in the south that were attacked by the Hamas. It's considered like a Holocaust. It brought back the memories of Holocaust. And for Palestinians, I hear also that what's been going on in Gaza, it triggers for them, like it's considered a second or third Nakba. So the violence, okay, and they're very central. They involve all society members, require great investment, materially and psychologically. Of course, again, in these days, it's very difficult to talk about it because every morning we wake up here and we hear the news about more soldiers that were killed. Of course, the Palestinians in Gaza have been killed and are still being killed, thousands of them. So, okay, the main point, the problem, the psychological problem is that it has a zero-sum nature. Okay, the perception that any gain of the other side is my loss. And talking about narratives, if I acknowledge the narrative of the other, it means that I'm giving up and parting with my narrative. It's perceived as irreconcilable by members of societies involved. This is very, very important. And unfortunately, I hear it every day. I hear it from the students also. I hear it from students. What do you mean? if we acknowledge the narratives of the Palestinians and their right and their justified struggle, we're forgetting who we are. We're giving up, okay? We're giving up the Zionist thinking about a more complex, and that's what I'll try to talk about in my work about dialogue. A complex thinking, a complex perception is very, very rare. People are thinking binary, black and here. That's the second one. Simplifying a complex reality to black and white. That's what people do. We're good, they're the evil. Okay? You saw it. I did my postdoctorate in George Mason. It was 9/11. And that's what happened also in America, right? They talked about the axis of evil. There were the good, there were the bad. Very simplified, very simplified. And right now, we're experiencing it here. It's very, very, very sad. Shared social beliefs, that's what Bartal wrote a lot about, the social beliefs that are common in intractable conflict. Of course, sense of justness and morality. Each side feel just. We are the just ones. We are peace-loving. We are moral. The perception of the army, it's called the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. And you think about the meaning of it. Israelis see the army as defending, okay? They don't see it as a generalization. Of course, nowadays there are more and more voices that are critical, okay? As I said, there are demonstrations here. I will not go into it. But the perception that is prevalent, that the army is for defense reasons, and not for attacking, not for how do you say, invading. Yeah, of course, it's seen differently from the Palestinian side. The IDF, yeah, the Israeli army is seen as very aggressive, violent, and as an instrument for expansion and occupying Palestinians. Exclusive victimhood, each side sees itself as a victim. Of course, the Jews see themselves since the Holocaust as the ultimate victim. No place, no room for other people or other nation or other collective as a victim. And of course, it's different. So you see it also these days. And unfortunately, each side sees in our television, in our communication system, we see only our side. We see the casualties that happen on the Israeli side. Of course, the hostages, or how do you call them, the kidnapped, and the soldiers that die. And we hardly see, the television hardly exposes to what happens in Gaza. Of course, Palestinians, in their communication systems and television, see what happens, all the devastations and all the death and terrible ruins in Gaza. And they are not exposed to what happens, hardly to the kidnapped or to soldiers who are killed. And so each side sees itself as the ultimate victim, okay? Delegitimizing the other and lack of trust. Okay, that's briefly, but very painfully and very deep, very deep, very deep. So, and again, if we're talking about narratives, okay, so our narratives really are very selective and very partial and unidimensional. And I must say that even this morning, I had a class in the university, and the good students, okay, and I brought a lecturer from the Bereaved Family Forum, Israeli-Palestinian Bereaved Family Forum, and he, talked, and gave a lecture and all this. And some of the students, very good students, really, in conflict resolution, master's degree, yeah. But one of them said, how can I accept this narrative, you know? It will mean that I erase my narrative. And it's amazing. These are very intelligent students. Yeah. She has also a degree in law and very intelligent. But the perception of, you know, the narrative as like a hallmark, this is our identity. And as we heard and we learned all these years, a certain way, a partial way. And when we're confronted with parts that are missing from our narratives, with parts that depict us as bad guys, as immoral, it's very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult for people to come to terms with. So the immediate defense mechanism is to reject it as lies, yeah, or as invented stories, or yeah, our narrative is the right one. It's the true history. The other one is invented, and both sides. So, okay, so let's talk about dialogue. So, as I said before, and probably you heard in many of the presentations, and that's what Kelman was doing, right? The interactive problem-solving workshops and face-to-face encounters and dialogue between adversaries. Anticipating these encounters would promote process of mutual recognition and lead to deconstruct, yeah, the biases and selective narratives. And what I want to say, what I discovered in my many years ago in my doctoral dissertation, that is not exactly like this. And what I came up with is an analysis of multiple levels of dialogue. Why? Because what I encounter in the main, how do you say, in the main, in the front stage, okay, the dialogue that usually we talk about is taking place between the two groups, the intergroup dialogue, okay, on stage. And in what I discovered there, and I'll show it in a minute, that the discourse is trapped in binary and split discourse. And a whole year, I observed for a whole year of dialogue, you know, that took place between students in our university, and it was stuck. It didn't advance anywhere. And what I discovered that more advance and development occur in a deeper levels, in a more internal levels. And so this is the article is about this framework of multiple levels of dialogue, okay? And I'll go into more detail about each one of them. So I call it external dialogue is what happens between the Jews and Palestinians or any other two groups of adversaries in a conflict. And then we have internal dialogues. In internal dialogues, I mean dialogue that takes place within one's group as a result and as a complementary to what happens between the groups. And this is very meaningful, what happens there. And also an inner, even more inner and intimate level of dialogue, which usually is hidden. It's hidden, is in the internal, within the consciousness of each participant. That's where I find the potential for transformation and change. And I'll talk about the potential, but also the unsettling of it. Okay, it's a potential, but also a threat. Okay, so the external dialogue that takes place between the groups actually reflects what I was describing before, a split discourse between, yeah, two mutually exclusive opposing frames of interpretation. Each side, yeah, talks about rulers and subject, oppressors and oppressed. We are, of course, the subject, they are the objects. We are the oppressed, the victims, the other side is the oppressor. We are the victims, they are the aggressor, and so forth. And that's what I discovered in the article. If you want to see all the examples that I give there, that's what we see. And I gave examples here. Okay, this is the picture that you see. It's actually from work I was doing for 6 years with the Bereaved Family Forums, the Israeli-Palestinian Bereaved Family Forum for Peace and Reconciliation. And they're meeting Israelis, Jewish Israelis, with Palestinians from the territories, from the PA. And so these are the pictures that you see. So the Palestinian members usually, they're concerned with ending the occupation, with social justice, with recognition of right to self-determination, okay? And they want Israel to take the responsibility of historical responsibility. While Israelis, Jewish members, okay, they are after legitimacy for Israeli presence, and they are expecting Palestinians to assume partial responsibility. And is, despite being seen as the big army in the Middle East, Israelis still look for recognition, to be recognized as a national Jewish state. It's hard to believe. Palestinians sometimes think about it as a manipulation. I'm telling you, it's real. People here still feel insecure and they are looking for recognition. So, and mutuality. Okay, mutuality. What happens in the dialogues between students is usually, it's amazing, all these years, it's usually the Palestinians, whether from the PA or from Israel, usually want to talk. They want to talk about the past, about the injustice that happened to them, about the tragedy. They want social justice, and they talk about a more collective, and they want to talk politics. They're looking for change, social change. The Israelis, Jewish, again, it's a generalization, it's a tendency, okay, not all of them. The Israelis usually, in the dialogue groups between students, usually want to talk about more personal level. Oh, leave politics aside. Let's talk about us, about Muhammad and Maya and all this. Why you bring politics all the time here? So they're big, again, the discourse is on different dimensions. And sometimes the participants come out very disappointed because, Jewish participants, students, pupils in school, in high school, they come out and say, oh, the Palestinians, the Arabs, here they call them the Arabs. They don't really want peace. Yeah, they just want to talk politics. They want to talk about occupation. They want to, and Palestinians and Arab come out disappointed. The Jews don't really want peace. They're not willing to admit what happened in the past. They don't want to talk about politics. So it's very important to realize the different frameworks, the narratives, and to talk about it. So anyway, so this is what happens in the external dimension, in the formal stage of dialogue. And I bring some psychological or psychoanalytic theories to analyze this binary discourse, the splitting. Melanie Klein, a famous psychoanalyst, talks about splitting as emotional state and talks about it as a more primitive way to cope with ambivalence, splitting the projecting the bad and undesired image onto the other. Okay? And she talks about infant or person or nation, yeah, developing from a more primitive way. I didn't put here the psychoanalytic terms, paranoid, schizoid. It's not relevant here, but just think about a primitive way to cope, like small children. They want to know who's the good and who's the bad, yeah? And they split. And they can't relate to their, babies can relate to their mother as both good and evil, sometimes satisfying, sometimes making them disappointing. So they usually split it, right? The good mommy, the bad mommy, the whatever. So the more developed layer, she calls it, when a person accepts ambivalence, it doesn't blame the other for his condition, but takes responsibility on it. Okay, and the splitting mechanism is exasperated in states of deep conflict, simplifying a complex reality into uniform black and white picture. And what we were doing this in our class this morning, and what the lecturer was trying to do is to advance a more complex thinking. And he, as a Zionist, Israeli Zionist, who lost his son to the conflict in a Lebanon war, he says, I'm a Zionist. I believe in our right to be here. But at the same time, I can acknowledge that there's another people, another nation that deserve their right, right? And they have a narrative and they have justification. I can accept it. It doesn't mean that I erase my narrative, but see it as a more complex. It was very difficult for the students, okay? Because the conflict situation really is a splitting, okay? And another psychoanalysis, the Winnicott, he talks about a transitional space, a mental space, and he talks about interaction between an inner and external environment. And I use it to think about interactions not only between the Palestinians and the Israelis and the Jews in the dialogue or any other opponents, but also interaction between external and inner reality. And I see the intra-group dialogue. What does it mean? In every, usually in those dialogue projects, usually each group meets also among themselves as a preparation for the dialogue, during the dialogue, at the end of the dialogue. And I think it started with Northern Ireland. They call it a uninational, uni-identity, single identity group. Here we call it uninational, okay? Uninational, the Jews or the Palestinians. And these dialogues, intra-group, are very, very meaningful. I call them behind the scene, because Palestinians are not exposed to what Israelis, Jews talk among themselves, and the Israelis are not exposed to what Palestinians talk among themselves. And it gives actually opportunity for people to have a more sincere exchanges, okay? To have inner disputes among themselves, which they don't show when they are in front of their opponent. And they can also explore, here I give some examples. Okay, sensitive issues. Okay, the army, I told you, the IDF. For Israelis, it's a defense force. And it's very proud. Israelis are very proud of it. You can see now it's terrible. But soldiers now, they're going and they're serving in reserve. They're spending now 100 days. Excuse me, students go away. They leave their work, their school, their families, they go automatic almost. Okay, they see it as their duty and they are proud of it to defend their country. Okay, of course, it's also seen as an instrument of violence and devastation and occupation. Okay, that's in the dialogue. Only when they are among themselves, the Israelis among themselves behind the scene, maybe they can allow some thinking about it, exploration about it, talk about it. It's very, very difficult. And you know, people here in Israel, when people are more, they want to stop the war, they want to advance peace. They see also justification for Palestinians' right of determination. Of course, they're immediately seen as, they're called, of course, leftist and traitors, okay? And so only in the backstage of inner dialogue, maybe it's possible to start a talk between different fractions in one own society, between people who are more left and people who are more right, okay, or more militaristic and more pacifistic. It will not be done in front of the opponent. So that's the potential I see. And with Palestinians, similarly, Palestinians will not show their different opinions and inner struggles in front of the Jews, of the Israelis. But there are some divergent opinions there. Some of them we can see now with the Hamas, what happened in 7th of October. Most Palestinians within Israel and in the PA will not haven't condemned the atrocities that they've done. Okay, they see it as a tool, a legitimate tool to attain freedom. Some of the Palestinians, you know, in all the NGOs who are working for peace, in the NGOs who have Palestinians and Israelis in common, it's been a big crisis these days, because the Jews, the Israelis, are expecting the Palestinians to at least to condemn the crimes of 7th October 7 by the Hamas, and to have some empathy towards Israelis, and the Palestinians, most of them don't do it. It's a big thing, okay? So in the inner dialogue, when they're amongst themselves in a safe, not always, but the dialogue that I observed, it was many years ago, in the safe space of one's own group, they allowed themselves to have those divergent views. And some of them were saying, you know, we have this legitimate struggle for our rights and freedom and our liberty. At the same time, you know, some of the things, terror attacks are not legitimate, but they will not say it on the front stage when they are meeting the Israelis and the Jews, okay? They will not say it. So I'm saying that the dialogue that happens in the intra-group backstage may be seen as a transitional space, okay, enabling to address, to have, I'm jumping here, to have a critical examination of one's own narrative, to promote a more complex and nuanced perspective, and to encourage creative thinking regarding the resolution of the conflict. Also, you have to address the negative emotions of one's own side. It's more difficult to do it when you are in front of the other side. Each side wants to show that they are strong, that they are united, okay? They don't want to show their weak sides, okay? So only in the uninational, in the intra-group, they can do it. And I describe in the article examples of how the dialogue there is much more heterogeneous and have multiple voices heard there. The third level, which I found the most dramatic and meaningful, and I call it hidden dialogues, because it's not part of the dialogue. At the best case, there will be intergroup and intragroup. But I got to know this, or to analyze this dialogue, because I was doing long, in-depth interviews with the participants of this one-year dialogue that happened in my university, okay? And we had long talks before the dialogue started, during and at the end. And the people who talked with me, when interviewed, you know, we got to have trust and intimacy, and they shared with me what's happening to them in their inner, okay? They struggle with some, you know, with some changes, with voices that they heard in the dialogue, with this other image of themselves that it was not easy to accept. And so I call it hidden dialogues. And what I wrote here, okay, the conversations between members of the opposing group in the external dialogue, in the intergroup dialogue, I argue that they continue to reverberate within participants' minds, and they actually create inner dialogue between participants, aggressive and moral aspects, okay? As I told you, here I give example, there were the students, most of them serve in the army. Israeli students serve in the army, and nowadays, you know, they're taken from their school year and they go to the army. And this side is seen for most Israeli with pride and as their loyalty to their people and as a duty. Okay? Of course, from the Palestinian point of view, it's seen as a militaristic, okay, aggressive side. And that's what they portrayed in the dialogue. They portrayed to the Israeli students or soldiers a militaristic and aggressive view. And so the students, the Israeli participants have to contain or to struggle with these both images, okay? Between their loyalty to the IDF and their moral worldview, they considered it their loyalty to their people, their duty. They are considered it as a good thing. Yeah, they are sacrificing, they're willing to sacrifice their life. So how can you condemn it? Of course, from the other side, it's seen as a militaristic. And so it's very difficult. If you manage to enter their shoes, as we say, you know, it's very difficult for people, for students, for young people who see what they're doing, especially these days, but even before, as something very noble. Yeah, willing to leave everything, live their comfort life, their families, their school, their careers. They're losing money. Business, independent, how do you say, private businesses lose money now. Some of them are closed. So they see it as a noble cause. And to meet people from the other side who see it as a terrible machine, aggressive, militant, yeah, causing that. It's very difficult. So in the inner dialogues, in the inner consciousness, they're starting to have a dialogue between the moral and aggressive sides of themselves. It's very, very unsettling. Really, you if you read the examples I write in more detail in the article. And so that's the only place, that's the only is the opportunity or yeah, that you confront these polarities, okay? And if you manage to do it, but you need a very supportive environment, you need the facilitators have to be aware of it. As Winnicott himself says, in order to advance, you know, to a more holistic understanding of reality, you need facilitating conditions. Okay, so if we have facilitating conditions and support and embrace from the facilitators and from other participants, maybe the participants can reconcile, okay, with the conflicting sides among ourselves, among our nation. Israelis now are defending themselves, but not only, they're also attacking, and they're also are aggressive. And some of us question, and in the demonstrations that are growing in our streets, people are starting to question, whether it's a defensive war, whether it's a war of choice, of expansion, of aggression. It's very difficult questions, and it's very difficult to do it when you're in front of your opponent. Very difficult. So I say the tension in confronting of these polarities of one's identity can lead to reconciling to create a space of reconciliation. And I emphasize here the movement. I'm not talking about changing opinions, changing sides, what Kelman, I think, write about changing narratives and identities and all that. No, I'm talking about a movement to initiate the potential of dialogue, the transformation potential of dialogue, I think, is to create a movement between those exclusive, unidimensional, closed binary, minds, to create a movement and to break out of the conflict monolithic frames, to overcome the dichotomous narratives and identity, and to facilitate a more complex and flexible approach that we can contain the situation of conflict and the parties involved. And so at the end, I just want to say that I see it as a complementary process, okay? So in order to promote relations between groups, communities, nations, I think I recommend to supplement the dialogue with the other with internal dialogues within each group, okay? I think it's very, very important to have inner dialogues within society, beyond the dialogue that is necessary with the opponent, okay? But we need to have dialogues and to have, how do you say, חשבון נפש, forget the term in English, what we do usually in Yom Kippur, to give account, self-account, or whatever, okay? We need to have a self-account on what we've been doing, to cope with the past, also with failures, also with the manifestation of violence of my group in the past and in the present, okay? To realize that the responsibility and the problem is not just the other, it's also with us. But as we saw in the long years of this conflict, of intractable conflict, we have all this psychological framework, we've been operating this defense mechanisms to cope with the difficulty by way of projecting all the bad onto the other and deny and the evil among us. And the only way we can do it is among ourselves. We can't do it in dialogue with the other. So that's what I'm suggesting, that complementary to intergroup dialogue, to activities that are done, common projects and all this, we need also inner dialogues. In conflict, we need inner dialogues within each group. And the whole presentation actually suggests the importance of dialogue conducted on various levels, on intergroup level, across the divide, and in a uninational setting where each group conducts a sincere and honest dialogue among its members. And yeah, we need to address the hard feeling. We need to cope with our vulnerability. We need to heal the pain and loss. We need to process the grief that in order to move to new places and to relinquish the feeling of victimhood. And we can do it only in uninational frameworks, not with the opponent. So conclusion, the dialogue is a multidimensional occurrence. It begins on the overt intergroup level, it penetrates the intragroup level, and it reverberates on the intimate internal levels within participants' mind. And that's the potential. That's where it enables to create a new, more complex discourse. More complex discourse, both about the other and about the self. That's about the relationship between us. Okay? The potential, the transformative potential of dialogue is that it can expand awareness and facilitates development of movement between the poles, embracing complexity that may inspire and enable further movement towards transformation of conflict. Without this movement, without this flexibility, without in building complexity, we are stuck. We are stuck in each one's framework and narratives and exclusive identity. That's briefly it. You can read more in the paper.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maya. That was very, very deep, very inspiring. Highly appreciated on this difficult subject. For the sake of time, I'll be very brief and succinct with my discussion comments or discussant responsibilities. Yeah, as I said, fascinating topic, dear to my heart, how to achieve transformation within dialogue in this very, polarized and dichotomous narratives. Just like one word each on the intergroup dialogue. I found it very fascinating how you described kind of the different aspects, kind of the Jewish versus the Palestinian. And obviously this reminded me of Nadler and Schnabel's needs-based model of reconciliation, that underlines this, kind of reaching out to, as you said, like recognition, the personal level relationship on the high power side, and kind of this more social justice, like empowerment on the Palestinian side. So this on the intergroup dialogue. On the intra-group dialogue, kind of the dynamics that you described reminded me of these, social identities theory, self-classification, Touchfield and Turner, Reynolds, kind of this switching between, or this dichotomy to some extent between like the individual identity, the individual self, and the group identity and self, and kind of to like unpack that in a good way, kind of to look at like within group variety and these sometimes rather different and distinct individuals. And finally, what I'm least familiar with, kind of this internal dialogue, I just have a question. So you said this is like a, triangulation or kind of, an iteration between these different forms. And do you have any, like you mentioned, kind of in facilitating conditions, this is something that happens. Do you have any experience or any ideas on how to like systematize that or enhance that within, dialogue processes that you have been involved?
It's very, very difficult. It can be, but it's a lot of investment to have like personal talks or personal processing or well, as you know, it's time consuming, and usually these projects are limited and budget limited and all this. So I have to think about it. How I don't think facilitators or donors, or funds would like to to expand the frameworks of these dialogues to even more. So I don't know exactly. Right now, I'm thinking about it more voluntarily. I don't know. If you have a very idealistic facilitator, like me, who is willing, to do, I do more than, voluntarily. I talk with people. I have Zoom meetings with my students too. I have I don't know. It's a question, actually. It's a question. We have to think about it.
Yeah, thank you. Let's open it for the audience. Hans Volker, I see you raised your hand. You have a question.
Hello, thank you very much. I like this very much. I have a question about religion. In former years, I was very much enthusiastic about Hans Küng and his way of thinking and interreligious dialogue. My question is, how is the help of the rabbis in the intra-group discussion for conflict resolution?
Oh, it's a very difficult question. I'm not an expert on religious, but I would say that the intra-group dialogue is very important there, but I don't know about the rabbi. I mean, well, I'll answer a little on the side. I accompany different projects, a very different project of NGO in Israel who calls Gesher, a bridge, and they are bringing Israeli Jews to meet, to get to know Jews in the diaspora. Okay, it's a very different topic. And they go to the States, for example, and they see the lives of the Jews in America and all the. There they meet. Usually they have a panel of rabbis from the different fractions: Orthodox, Conservative, Reform. I don't know if you're aware of the different fractions. Okay, here in Israel, there's not much tolerance. There's not much plurality. There's the Orthodox Jews, okay? The conservative, the reforms are not so much acknowledged, So when the Israelis go to the States and they meet this plurality, they meet the three rabbis sitting together and having a very tolerant discourse, they come back and they say, wow, it is possible. It is possible, we're all Jews, and we should learn to live with each other, to respect each other, to be tolerant, so they see it's possible. Here in Israel, it's very difficult. We're not there yet. So if you're asking about the role of the rabbi, it depends which rabbi. If you take an Orthodox an ultra-Orthodox rabbi, you will not hear much divergent views there, or much tolerance for diversity. Yeah, there will be a line of a more line of the Orthodox, mostly also nationalistic. If you bring a more reform rabbi, and you see here in Israel, there are rabbis for human rights. It's big NGOs. They're doing great things. They're going to help Palestinians in the PA who are harassed by settlers. You know, they help them harvest and work their fields and so on. But they are delegitimized by the Orthodox rabbis.
Okay.
So peace, dialogues for peace with Palestinians, the rabbis, the reform rabbis, and some of the conservative rabbis have a role there, yeah. But it's in their synagogues, in the reform, in the States, it's maybe it's modern Orthodox, I don't know. But among the more Orthodox rabbis here, it's more closed, how shall I say? So I don't know if I gave you an answer, but
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Sonia, you raised your hand and have a question.
Hi, thank you. I find it quite an interesting approach. And I have a question toward the the narratives. If you think, according to what you studied, that it would be possible to create a shared narrative between Israelis and Palestinians on the basis of the existing narratives, or if it would be if you would rather need to create a new narrative and maybe give up some of the existing.
Look, this was this actually was Kelman's suggestion, I think, to change the narrative to and some of the writers, Paul Mendes-Flohr, to include in our narrative the narrative of the other. All the efforts that have been done here and the research on narrative show that it's not possible, and I say it's not necessary. I mean, get familiar with the narrative of the other, about the same events, you know, about the same major events, about the history, about what's happening now. It's imperative that Israelis would be exposed and would know how Palestinians experience the reality and what is their interpretation, and therefore it's imperative, and vice versa. But to respect it, to take it into account, I don't need to change my narrative, okay? I need to be more critical and to be exposed to all kinds of events that were erased from my narrative, and some of war, some of crimes, and some of events where Israelis were not so righteousness. I have to know about it. I have to be more critical. I have to have a more round, okay, notion of my narrative, and I have to know the narrative of the Palestinians, and I have to respect it. And then when we have negotiations or dialogues, we need to respect both narratives. That's all I think we can do. It's a lot to give, to get to know and to acknowledge, okay, that there can be another narrative of what's happening now. I don't think it's possible and it's necessary to change one's narrative.
And just to add on, as you mentioned, even just kind of realizing the other narrative is like complicated and difficult enough. You know, if we remember Dan Baron's and semi-advanced, you know, kind of dual, you know, kind of school book project, and as you said, kind of teaching about the Nakba.
This is a good example. What they try to do,
yeah,
what they try to do in the project, Dan Baron and and history teachers. They sat for 7 years, and the product that they came up with is very nice. It consists of 2 pages. They took main events, central events in the history of the conflict, and on one page they depict the Zionist history from the point of view of Israelis, and on the other page, the way it's told and understood from the Palestinian perspective, and then they leave vacant, empty space for the students to write their own understanding or something. So it's very respectable and unobtrusive, I think. But Ministry of Education banned it. It's not. It's forbidden to teach in the Israeli schools, in a Jewish school, the Palestinian narrative about the Nakba, because it might undermine, the legitimacy or the righteousness of the Israeli one, and vice versa. I'm telling you, of course, in the Palestinians, in the PA also, it's not legitimate at all to teach about the Israeli-Palestinian narrative, or to even meet, or to even have dialogue with Israelis. It's considered to be I forget the term right now. Tatbi is a cooperation with the enemy. Yeah.
Thank you, Maya. Welcome, Werner. You had a question. Is that still relevant?
I just wanted to speak
Hi.
about this book. Exactly. But I have maybe an additional question. So I'm very happy that you spoke about it. You mentioned that it is forbidden in the Israeli Jewish schools, but as far as I know, it is also forbidden in the Palestinian schools.
Yeah, that's what I said.
In Israel, not only in the Jewish schools in Israel. And that's really the question of power. And up from this moment, it's very difficult to start this mechanism of dialogue and reflection of your own position. I think this is really a problem. Okay, but
yeah, you know that inside Israel, the Arab or the Palestinians school is under the Ministry of Education, is under the Israeli Ministry of Education. They control everything. Yeah. And the perception is that if you teach about the Nakba and about the history of Palestinian past, it will arise, how do you say, revolt or national sentiments and rebellion and all this. This is the old perception. And the more our governments are right-wing, the harsher it gets. Yeah. The Bereaved Family Forum, if you are aware of them, the Israeli-Palestinian Bereaved Family Forum, have been banned also. Last year, the Ministry of Education forbade them to enter schools. And they appealed to the Supreme Court. I just heard today from the lecturer, and they won. They're back. They're back in the schools. But such an activity, okay, instead of viewing it as expanding, our awareness, as flexing, as helping us to maybe promote coexistence here. How many years we'll have these wars, more and more and more and more, yeah? Unfortunately.
Yeah, thank
As
you.
I said, now it's very dark times. It's more difficult than before. For people like us, okay, for people who want to work to promote coexistence and peace, it's more difficult. It's more difficult.
Yeah. Nadia, you have a question?
Yes. Hello, everyone. So first of all, Maya, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge. Well, as I'm from Ukraine, so we are struggling here with a kind of similar situation. And yeah, so for me, it was very interesting to hear what you are saying about this, how you built this kind of dialogue. And I wanted to share just my thoughts about when you were talking about narratives. You said that narratives, they are deeply connected to identity. And you know, in case we will start like changing these narratives, well, to promote peace, we need to see the perspective, the situation from the other's perspective. So we should somehow change our like internal narratives and our worldview and so on. So each group in this conflict. And does it mean that the group itself should change like its identity?
No. I emphasize it all the time. No, no. You have your narrative and your belief in everything. That's good, that's fine. But add to it, expand it to be more inclusive, that there is another narrative that is also legitimate, that also exists. And don't just delegitimize it and erase it as you're the righteousness and they are the, that's all I'm saying is learn it and respect it. And when you're trying to solve or to transform conflicts, take it into consideration and think about what you can do to answer also the needs and aspirations of the other side. No, don't change your identity. No, that's not the message. That's what people sometimes think, that they're afraid that you ask them to relinquish, you know, their identity, their narrative, their belief system, their history. No.
And what do you mean by identity? Sorry, just to clarify, what is your definition of identity? How do you identify it, define it?
I don't know what to say. My identity is multiple. Yeah, I'm Jewish. I'm Israeli. I'm a woman. I'm a human being. I'm a person of the world. I'm human rights. I'm pacifist. I'm all those things. And it's multivariate. The minute in the conflicts, it's like the identities also are Vulcan has a great article when he talks about, he says every one of us have a individual identity, unique, yeah, and also social identity, yeah, that is composed from the groups you belong to. And he says that in conflicts, or whenever you have a collective trauma, chosen trauma, he writes a lot about these topics. He says that the collective identity, the social identity, assumes a more central role, and the other ones go to the background. And in this conflict, or right now in the war, the identity that comes to the front is this nationalistic, and defensive Jewish Israelis. And the more there are criticism in the world, people here become more defensive and more, and you see, on some dimensions of my identity, I might find more in common with some of the Palestinian than with some of my people. But right now, so as long as I'm aware of the complexity and the multi-facet of identities, I might be able to connect more, to cooperate more. But when you narrate to this, only to the nationalistic, opposing, so you know, some of the soldiers who died in the war, and some of the people who were murdered in southern Israel, yeah, by the Hamas, in some of the kibbutzim, in Be'eri, in Kfar Aza, many of them were leftist peace activists, yeah, who were doing all kinds of activities with Palestinians from Gaza. This was their identity, their main identity. Unfortunately, because they were Israelis, yeah, considered, that's what conflicts do to us. So it narrows down. So no need to erase or to give up, but just expand. That's what I'm saying.
May I say one more comment? Just what bothers me, this exactly what you said. Well, I perceive identity the same. I just wanted to realize that we are talking about the same thing. And this social identity, it is built from like what we are taught at school, at the university, about history of our like the nation, history of our country, and so on. And for example, in case if right now, as you said, answering previous question, if we do not in Israel, for example, if Jewish students are not allowed to know about Nakba, so they in their identity, this kind of part of history will be deleted, and it means like their identity would be different and more more aggressive to this Palestinian population, as far as they do not know about that previous historical event.
It's partial, it's biased, and it's exclusive, and we want it to be more inclusive and more whole. And more whole. It's not to say that you have no right to be a Zionist, that you don't have right to be here. No, you have a right to be here. You have legitimacy to be here, but also be aware that there are other people here that they deserve also. So it's enlarging, it's expanding, it's making it more, yeah? It's not to take away what you have and change it. But it's perceived because of the conflict, because of the perception of zero-sum game, it's perceived as if I acknowledge the other, right? I erase my own, I give up my own. It's perceived like this. But that's not what I think we want. We want expansion.
Words about your time, Maya.
Yeah, I just
we can
want to
have
say
one more question and yeah, question or reaction or whatever you want. One more.
I would have a question.
Yeah.
Maya, before October 7, people were speaking of a certain fatigue of Israelis to engage with Palestinians for peace talks, not interested anymore that much, even though they would favor peace eventually. It's been always like the same. You said that it became more difficult to engage with the other side, not being conceived as a traitor or something. But do you have the impression that something changed in the perception of the need to start speaking with the other, or is it just impossible to say, giving the
Look, I'll give you the example of this morning, the lecture from the Bereaved Family Forum. So one of the students, I'm fortunate to have a student who is a ultra-Orthodox religion, okay? I'm very glad for it. So he asks at the end of he asks the lecturer, but after October 7th, it didn't make you a switch in your, it didn't change your ideology. You still think about peace and we have to talk and dialogue. For him, it's obvious that now there's no, yeah? But the lecturer, the bereaved family member said, on the contrary, no, not on the contrary. It strengthened my belief that the only way that we can coexist here is if we talk and if we cooperate and if we learn to live together. More war, more war, more war. Yeah. But that's people who are already, you know, who it's their core belief, ideology, identity. And as I said, some of the people from the kibbutzim in the south, Be'eri and Kfar Aza and other, were, you know, suffered big losses, terrible atrocities, and they are evacuated. You know, they still didn't come back to their places, to their kibbutzes and villages. And those who were peace lovers, whatever they're called, yeah, they didn't relinquish their ideology. They say it's a proof that we need to work more and more and more towards it. But people who are more to the right and some of the center, yeah. Yeah, it's been a big swipe now to the right. Yeah, it really hurts the cause of peace building and all this. But among the ones who are working there, it just strengthened the need for it.
More or less, it increases the inner divides, the inner Israeli divides, right? More or less.
Yeah. Okay, so I hope it was interesting and it helps you, and maybe it will help us one day. I don't know. Right now, you know, really the intergroup dialogue is ceased. There are no projects stopped. They're stopped right now. No dialogues. It's too difficult for both sides. I hope it will resume soon.
Let's hope so, indeed. Thank you very much, Maya.
Okay.
All the best to you.
Good luck to everybody.
Take good care.
Thank you, Maya. All the
Bye
best.
bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.